Well, so for our crash courses, time is relatively limited. We will only be chatting for around 45 minutes today. So because of that, I am going to go ahead and kick us off right now at the hour, and I'm sure more people will be trickling in. But I just wanted to extend a really warm welcome to How to Take a Gap Year, the ultimate crash course, where you will be really learning our top tricks and resources for a super successful gap year tonight. We're so lucky to have Julia Rogers join us today, and I won't spend too much time speaking so you can interact with her, who you guys all came for. I did just want to quickly note that this webinar is being recorded, so if you have to head out early, no worries. You can catch that later on our YouTube channel. And speaking of our YouTube channel, speaking of links and resources, I'll be mentioning a bunch of those throughout the night, and don't worry about writing down URLs or writing down, names of links. I will be dropping them in the chat later once I'm through with these slides. And then I'll also be sending out an email tomorrow with everything that I mentioned as well. So you're all taken care of there. Okay, and some of the first resources that I do want to mention, if you haven't already, please do join us at a fair. It is Gap Year Exploration Month, and so I say it's a perfect excuse, if you needed one to begin with, to come to a fair and really make a lot of great connections with Gap Year program providers and expert Gap Year counselors and consultants like Julia. You are able to really get a good rundown of what taking a gap year is like, and then be able to really see the options available. So it's a wonderful opportunity, and our next fair is actually this Thursday, so I definitely encourage all of you to attend. Next, I would really recommend too that you visit our Gap Year Hub if you haven't done so already. So this is a 24/7 resource where you can find a whole bunch of great gap year articles and read reviews, and then we'll also have a scholarship launching there on March 1st. A $5,000 gap year specific scholarship. So keep your eyes peeled and definitely check out that site then. And then finally, I want to bring to your attention the Gap Matcher quiz, which is my perhaps favorite resource of all. So if you still haven't really narrowed down what kind of gap year program you or your child are interested in, this is a great way to do it. So you'll just input your own kind of gap year goals and interests, and then you'll come out with a list of really customized, personalized gap year programs to check out. So highly recommend doing that. And again, I'll be dropping the links to all of these later in the chat. So again, you are here tuning into the Ultimate Crash Course, and I'm so grateful for that and so excited to be able to speak with you today. We're about halfway through our crash course sessions. So we have a number of great ones coming up though, where you can explore gap year's career options, how to really choose a gap year program, and then more information on that $5,000 gap year scholarship that I mentioned earlier. And then one final announcement from me. So here at USA Gap Year Fairs and Go Overseas, we are always really trying to do better and find more ways to respond to your needs and respond to your feedback. So I would love to hear your voice and your opinions about your experience tonight so that I can better improve these crash courses moving forward. So I will be dropping a link to a really quick post-event survey, and I would love if you could fill it out. Just for those reasons that I mentioned before, so that the rest of our crash courses can be even better. And then I actually did not mention the most important thing about these surveys is that if you fill it out within 24 hours of this event, you'll be automatically entered into a contest to win $250. So it's really that simple, and it's a great way to earn some maybe extra cash to put towards that gap year. All right, that was a lot of talking for me. Thank you for bearing with me and for sitting through that. And now we get to go to the very best part of all, where I can introduce our lovely speaker for tonight, Julia Rogers of NROUTE Consulting. Julia is an amazing accredited expert gap year counselor, but not only that, she's a stupendous human being. I feel very lucky to be able to have her here tonight, and I know you are going to learn so much from her. She has over a decade of experience advising and guiding students through their gap year journeys. So needless to say, we are very lucky to have her today. All right, Julia, and with that, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Claire. And for all those who are attending, isn't she just a ray of sunshine? I feel like it is always such a pleasure to co-present with you, because you're just so enthusiastic, and I feel like it's the perfect lead-in to be talking about, whatever it is you all want to talk about, because that's why we're here tonight. It's actually, I find AMAs really fun because I love answering questions on the fly and really trying to dig into what you all care about. So this is not going to be my agenda tonight, it's going to be your agenda. But Before we get started, I'll tell you just a little bit about yourself so that you know why you might be listening to me and why I consider myself a gap year expert. But I have been a professional gap year counselor for 13 years. It's basically been my whole career. I went to Hamilton College. After Hamilton, I went on my own gap year where I spent almost a year in Tanzania. That's that top picture there. And then when I came back, I thought, wow, we really need to be encouraging gap years in our young people. And that is what inspired me to start En Route. And to this day, I've been working with students all over the country, many hundreds of them at this point. So it is such a pleasure to guide students through this process. I am professionally accredited by the Gap Year Association. I am on their board, and I also chair the outreach committee, which is currently spearheading Gap Year Exploration Month, which Claire mentioned before. So definitely, eat, sleep, breathe gap years. It's my passion. It's what I love. And next week, actually, I'll be on my way to Colombia to do some personal travel and gap year research. So that is a perk of the job, is that I travel a lot and get to see and experience gap year programs on the ground. So we can definitely talk about that as we move through our questions tonight. So, really what I want to do before I open the floor to what your questions are is anchor us to a definition. So Claire, you can click over to that next slide. A gap year, as I define it, is a structured period of personal growth supported by activities of enrichment. And it's really meant to deepen one's personal, practical, and professional awareness. So, really in that definition, there are some guardrails and benchmarks that you want to be thinking about for your young person, but also you can see that it also opens up so many opportunities for them within that framework. So there's many, many different types of activities and opportunities that can support these types of growth. But really what we want to see at the end of the day is a student taking ownership of their gap experience and really making it their own. And you as parents or caregivers are integral parts of that process for them, but it's also really unique because you're also hoping to kind of push them out of the nest. So I'm hoping tonight we can spend some time talking about what, how you can do that effectively and how you can really encourage your young person to take that time for themselves and do as much as they can for themselves as possible. So next slide, I just am kind of going to try and prime the pump here, if you will. These are some kind of general topics that you're welcome to ask me questions on. Personal safety, COVID safety, insurance questions. That's kind of like, I know that's a very large question mark for a lot of parents, is that they want to know more about how to, create more assurances that a student can have a safe experience. Locations, and that can again be COVID related locations or just general questions on where people take gap time, types of opportunities, both structured and self-designed that are out there. And then, just guidance questions. How can you help be a support person in your young person's year while also giving them as much autonomy over the experience as possible? So hopefully that helps give you some ideas of what we can talk about. But without further ado, I'm ready to jump in. I am excited, and I'm gonna let Claire's gonna be kind of like running the Q&A boxes and things like that. And I will be, if I send her a resource or something like that, she can also drop any links in the chat as well. So I'm ready when you are.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was such a lovely intro, and I appreciate you giving those definitions and kind of guiding us through some potential conversation topics. So please, if you do have a question for Julia, now is your time to ask. This next 45 minutes is really all about you. So as Julia said, please throw those questions into the chat box, into the Q&A box, wherever is easiest for you. I'll be monitoring it. And while you kind of get those juices, the question juices flowing, and while you throw those into the chat, Julia, I'm going to start us off with actually a question tonight that I've been curious about. So how far in advance would you say is it necessary to start planning a gap year?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. And that's a really common question that I hear from parents a lot is, how far in advance do you need to book opportunities? But also, when do you even need to decide on taking a gap year and start those planning pieces? So the good news is that a gap year does not need to be planned 3 years in advance or 2 years in advance or even a year in advance. I would say that a lot of the students that I work with and a lot of students take gap time in general are probably feeling like they want to take a gap year and starting to let some ideas percolate in their younger years of high school, but then they really don't start actually planning until senior year of high school. And then to get even more specific, college-bound students, because they're pretty involved and consumed with the college planning process senior year, a lot of them will, focus on their applications in the fall. And then once those college applications are out the door, really turn their focus to their gap year planning. So that is really what I see. And then when we're talking about programming and filling and deadlines and stuff like that, most programs have rolling admissions deadlines, and most of them will extend well into the summer. So as in like the summer before the gap time even starts. So you will have plenty of time for choosing programs, applying, and then getting onboarded into programs if that's what a student wants to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia. That's wonderful.
Sure.
Good information. Yeah. And then I also want to put forth, while we're waiting on some questions, one question that I actually get a lot here at USA Gap Year Fairs from parents, which is, how do I kind of balance my students or my child's, need for autonomy with my desire to really, help them during their gap year? What's that balance like? I know you mentioned guidance a bit in those intro slides. Would you speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. And so I think that, one of the things about a gap year is that we're really trying to get the young person themselves to be the captain of the ship. And then, the parents are kind of meant to be support crew. This is not a perfect analogy. In fact, I would invite anyone to drop a better analogy in the chat, but I think that you understand what I'm saying, in that we really want to give a young person the tools to execute on their gap year. But really what that starts with is some really open and frank communication as a family. So whether the gap year idea is coming from the parents or from the students, kind of getting everybody to sit down around the kitchen table and say like, okay, what are your thoughts? What are the kinds of things you think you want to do? And then for parents, it's really important for a young person for you to be transparent about what budget you might be working with, what you're willing to pay for, what you're not willing to pay for, what the expectations are that they are going to contribute to their gap time. And then beyond the budget stuff, also talking about expectations around structure, locations, the kinds of things that you have hard stops on. If you're like, no, you cannot go to Ukraine on your gap year, that is not something we would support. Saying that right off the bat, saying all the things that you need to say at the beginning about your things that you would not tolerate. And then they know what the hard stops are, and they can start their planning process kind of with those parameters in mind. So we really want to help those students, not choose things that are going to be actively discouraged by their parents, but we also want to allow students to work within a framework that's acceptable to everybody. So I think that like starting off with this really clear communication is a really important starting point. I could go on and on and on, but I'd be also really excited to hear more specifically what parents want to know in that kind of guidance and around the planning journey stuff. So we can talk more about that later too.
Those are great points. Thank you, Julia. Yeah, I'm excited to come back to that conversation and maybe even kind of verge into it too with this really good question from Sue. So Sue asks, my student is a little reluctant to research, including attending these presentations, which might be reluctant about taking a gap year, but I feel clear this would be an important experience for various reasons. Is there a good way to inspire or nudge or really catalyze her without pressure?
Such a good question. And it is tricky when you're the parent who can kind of see why a gap year would be so beneficial to your young person and them kind of feeling that like resistance. So I think that knowing what that resistance is all about is important. Sometimes, and this kind of depends on the community that you're in, what is the reputation of a gap year in your community? Is it something that is known to be like really cool and adventurous and well thought of? Or is it taken sometimes as you don't think I can go to college right away kind of insult? And so depending on where you're from and what messages they're getting about gap time in their own community or school, that could be some of the subtext that's going on in that reluctance. And so I think that, framing a gap year as a gift of time and a gift of permission that you are giving to them as a parent is setting the stage for it to be a really positive decision on their part if they decide to go for it. Then again, the reluctance could be, I don't want to sit in front of the screen anymore because I'm like totally burnt out on screens and virtual events. And if it's more around just the format of events and virtual research and things like that, then I would really encourage, and this is something I would encourage across the board, for them to actually talk to a gap year alum or watch YouTube videos that feature students themselves, like recent gap year alums, talking about their gap time. Because all of us as adults can talk till the cows come home about how amazing a gap year is, but they actually hear it when it comes from a peer in a different way. So if they don't have anybody in their community who's taking gap time who they would feel comfortable reaching out to, or you on their behalf, then I would highly recommend using the internet as your friend and finding some cool videos and resources that way and sending them off. And one just off the top of my head is that over on the Gap Year Association Instagram handle right now, which is just at Gap Year Association, there's a student video every day during this month, Gap Year Exploration Month. And they're really, really dynamic and fun videos that kind of talk about different aspects of gap year planning. So that's a great initial resource to show to her.
Yes, thank you so much, Julia. That is a really, really good point. And I have to also kind of mention too, another good video that you could watch is a recording of our last AMA, which was for Gap Year alumni. And I cannot speak more highly of that that crash course.
Drew, who was the other alum you had?
Drew
Freya?
And Nicole.
Nicole.
So they were
yeah.
Yes, they were representing different gap year experiences, but it was so engaging. It was so lively. A lot of really great questions were answered. So I will drop the links to that right now in the chat, but I definitely encourage your student to check those out.
Yeah, that's a great example of a good resource for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Julia. Okay, so this question from Meg, or from her husband, is very similar, but I think that we could also kind of offer some more insight here too. So Meg says, our daughter says she wants to take a gap year. She's only a 17-year-old senior, so we fully support it. How do we get her to even look into it on her own?
Okay, so she wants to take a gap year. She's a little young for her grade, so that's a good reason to take gap time. So I assume that she's going to be 18 when she graduates, because if she's already 17 now, then probably she'll turn 18 very close into her gap year. So that's good, because it opens up more opportunities. If you're under 18 taking a gap year, then some opportunities may be not available. So 18 in September, perfect. Okay. Most gap year programs that are structured will allow you to be on there as long as you graduate high school. So plenty of opportunities for her turning 18 in September. So I would say that the best way to kind of get her to start understanding how to research herself is to start small. It can be kind of intimidating sometimes to go into the internet or even a gap year fair where it's pretty structured and kind of know where you want to start. So I would say, you know, a simple brainstorming exercise might help her at this stage. I actually use an exercise based on that definition that I shared before, where it's the 3 Ps: personal, practical, and professional. So if you write on a piece of paper those 3 words and then have her brainstorm a couple things in each of those categories that she would want to use her gap year for, that can help the research turn from like being a top-down approach of just seeing what's out there and seeing what might be interesting to a more kind of funneled approach where you're actually looking for things. So personal goals are going to be more things that are hobbies that you want to take a deeper dive into, things you just want to do for fun, new experiences you want to have, maybe locations that are of interest. The practical goals are going to be more of those life skills goals. So gain confidence, meet new people, get my driver's license, kind of more of the adulting skills that we want our kids to learn. And then the pre-professional kinds of goals are going to be around career exploration. So that maybe that's an internship, maybe that's working for part of your year, maybe that's taking a photography course so that you can enhance your social media marketing skills. So kind of taking a look at what she might be interested in down the line and seeing how you could fit that into a gap year experience is a good way to do that. So little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think having her really sit down and brainstorm some possibilities. It doesn't have to be like, I think I want to do a program that does this. It's more of the pieces that could create an experience. And then, you know, you start to combine those things. So if she says that she wants to work on her Spanish and she really wants to, you know, volunteer with animals, then maybe she goes to Costa Rica and works at an animal sanctuary. You know, so there's ways to kind of combine the goals into experiences themselves and to kind of create the itinerary from there.
I love that. Thank you. And I think speaking to, you know, creating an itinerary, yeah, super helpful. You know, I think a lot of people kind of ask themselves, should I dive right into this gap year planning myself, or should I go with a gap year consultant or a counselor? So would you be able to speak on that a little bit, Julia, in terms of, what would a counselor like yourself or what would a consultant offer? Pros and cons there, perhaps.
Sure, sure. So I just want to say totally upfront, everybody, every family is fully capable of planning a gap year themselves. Just like you can go out and buy a house without a real estate agent, and you could write a will without an attorney. Okay, I'm not going to compare myself to an attorney, but there are, using a gap year consultant is kind of similar to using a real estate agent. It kind of smooths the process. It takes some of the stress away and it saves you a lot of time. So I think that working with a gap year consultant really comes down to the family dynamic, how headstrong and self-assured the student is in planning their year. And then also, if you feel that sense of foreboding or overwhelm during the beginning stages of the gap year process, those are all good indicators that bringing in a counselor to kind of help with that, and it is a lot of fun too. So the other situation I would say that a counselor can be really helpful in is if there's any tension brewing between parents and the student themselves, like if there's differences in how you think a gap year should be spent or those kinds of things, having a neutral third party involved can be really priceless for parents, especially because they, it's amazing. Sometimes one of the parts of my process that I do is I'll talk to parents alone without a student and say, what do you think that Jimmy should experience on his gap year? And they'll, give me a laundry list of things that they think would be great. And if they said that to their own son, guess how much they would hear and how receptive that kid would be to those suggestions. But I take all of that feedback and I kind of will compute it and then put it into my process and use that as information to help finesse those recommendations and guidance. And a student hears it from me completely differently. And I think that honestly, that is one of the reasons why gap year counselors exist, is to kind of help make that communication process simpler and easier for families, and also to help students feel really heard in the process too, because I think that treating young adults with that amount of respect and really giving them the opportunity to show up as an adult is a really important part of the process as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Julia. So I believe Sue has a follow-up question to that, which is, how much can one expect to pay for counseling or consultation?
Yes, great question. So people have different packages and things like that. I can say, in general, if you have worked with a professional college consultant, gap year counseling in most areas of the country tends to fall much lower in price point than your average, I'm going to get your kid into Harvard college consultant. So that's kind of nice for people, but it really ranges. Some consultants work on an hourly basis, and you can kind of level up depending on how many hours you need. I and many of my colleagues work on a package basis, and the packages tend to run between $1,500 and $2,700. I think offhand from me and my competitor colleagues. I don't know. We all work together very well, so it's hard to say that, but. And then some people have different numbers of hours of contact time within those different packages. But mine, for a student who takes a gap year, my full year package is $2,500. And that's kind of all inclusive from when we start working together, usually around now senior year, through the end of their gap time. So that really allows for the planning process, the launch process, being on hand during a gap year, and then debriefing and kind of sending them off to the next thing after their gap year, usually college.
Perfect. Excellent follow-up question and really comprehensive follow-up answer. So thank you both, Sue and Julia, for that. Okay, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to start calling some folks out. So I see a number of attendees here who have not asked a question, and I get that, but also, this is really great time. This is pretty much like a free consultation session. So definitely do throw those questions into the chat or into the Q&A. And meanwhile, Julia, I'm going to put forth a question that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds. Maybe not so much a question, but just a general, if you could speak to it. So how is the difference? Okay, wait, this one is a great follow-up question, and I'll come back to my question. But Amelia just wants to know, do you allow just 1 or 2 hour consultation?
I'm really actually happy about this follow-up question because I forgot to say the most important thing for all of you to know is that almost all gap year counselors offer free introductory sessions and brainstorming sessions. And so that is a great opportunity to kind of dip your toe in and see if working with a counselor might be right for you. So most people in that 1 hour consultation, it's more of a brainstorming session. It's not matching with programs. I don't typically do hourly consultations just because I feel like I really need to get to know a student before I start sending them ideas and helping them craft an itinerary. But there are gap year counselors out there who do 1 hour consultations or 2 hour consultations. And it's more just a, quick in and out, like give you some great ideas and then send you on your way. So there are some people who do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia. And yeah, I'm glad that came up because I was going to actually bring that up as well. And I also apologize. I'm getting so dark over here. That's why I keep on trying to move my video to get some more light, but I forgot to turn on the lights. Anyways, let's get back to these questions. So Shannon asked, are there ways to work abroad and still make money? I really want to leave my hometown, but still want to make money. Great question.
Yes, great question. And so the answer is yes. So in normal times, we're going to pretend like pandemic isn't a thing for a moment. Usually you can, as an 18-year-old American citizen, you can typically get what's called a working holiday visa. And it's easiest to get these in either Australia or New Zealand. And you apply through the immigration websites and you can basically just get a visa. It's good for a year, usually from date of issue. And then you show up, you can get a job, you can get a bank account, and that is good for up to a year. And usually you can do that from any time from when you're 18 to 30. So it's kind of a young person's moving abroad for a year kind of thing. I've had loads of students take advantage of that, again, in the before times, mostly New Zealand. New Zealand's actually one of my favorite places to have students do a working holiday because it's a small country, it's super friendly, it's easy to get work for young people, and it's got like a really fun backpacker culture. So that's where I would recommend if you're going abroad. New Zealand is reopening its borders in April, but I can't say that I know about the status of their working holiday visas and when that program is going to be back up and running. So my alternative information that I'll share is that the other great opportunity to consider is destination work within the States. And so destination work is basically going and working somewhere, earning money, and having like easy housing or housing included in your work. So an example of this would be going to work in Yellowstone National Park in a lodge, and they have staff housing as part of that experience. So you live in like a dormitory kind of thing. So it's super social, you're working with other young people, you get to go explore a national park in your free time, and you're earning money along the way. So it's a cost positive kind of experience. And you can do that all over the place in the States. I've had students do it at ski resorts. Like I said, our national lands and parks, any other place that can be like considered a destination where there's lodges often has employee housing. So that's really what you want to be looking for, is the employee housing. That's the key. And then beyond that, I'd also recommend AmeriCorps programs, which often offer either a stipend or they do stipend and housing as part of their programming. So that's kind of our domestic Peace Corps. And if you're an 18-year-old high school graduate, you qualify for many programs within AmeriCorps. So that's another great option to consider.
Nice. Thank you, Julia. Such a good point too about, thinking beyond pay and really getting into benefits and perks too, because those go a long way, especially when it's housing.
I'll just quickly answer Sue's question about Peace Corps. You have to have at least 2 years of college to join the Peace Corps. So a lot of post-high school students are not qualified for the Peace Corps. And it's also a 2.5 year, it's a 2 year and 3 month long dedicated experience, because they usually get 3 months of training and then your actual service is 2 years. So most people wait until after college to join the Peace Corps.
Phenomenal. That is a good point. Thank you for jumping in there and answering that quickly.
No worries. Wanted to stay on kind of on the same topic.
Yes, so. Definitely. Okay, so Meg and or her husband Shishir have a great question, which is, we are thinking about a shorter gap year program, maybe 8 to 12 weeks in the spring. What is the timing on that time frame?
Yeah, so lots of programs can be done within that time frame. There's interning can be done 8 to 12 weeks, volunteering programs. that's a great time frame for, or these more experiential programs where you're traveling with a group to different places and kind of having more of a buffet type of experience. So for a spring-based gap year program, that would be, I would say I definitely have that figured out by the holidays. So around December, January, you want to have that kind of carved in. The earlier the better though. So if you know around November or even earlier what program you want to do, you basically apply, and most programs have an application process and a small deposit that you put in, and then the payment plan kind of kicks in as it gets a little bit closer to departure. So let me know if I answered that question or if I misunderstood it, but I think I got it, hopefully.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Perfect. Yes. And they also have a follow-up question too. And I know you touched on this briefly as well with those other examples of gap time abroad and here in the States, but we're wondering about an example of what a student has done during their gap time.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's either Meg or her husband. Okay. Why don't we do this? I want her to type in, or him to type in the chat, three areas of interest, or 2 areas of interest and a location. And I will create a sample idea of how that gap year came about. It could be more than 3, but just at least 3 things for me to kind of sink my teeth into. And I'll either make up an example, or I will give an example of a previous student that it reminds me of. It could also be like kind of qualities of the student, if that makes sense. So let's answer a different question and I'll come back to that one.
That's perfect. Thank you, Julia. Okay. Oh, we got them coming in, but yes, let's get to Naomi's. And Naomi's question is, hello, my son will be graduating this June and he will only be 17 years old. He'll turn 18 in 2023. What's available for younger students? That's such a great question.
Yes, it is. And as I was saying before, there are some things that would prevent that, are age related. So really what you want to look for 17-year-old gappers are more structured opportunities. So experiential education programs that are US based will often take 17-year-olds onto their programs. So these are like service learning semesters, outdoor education semesters. As long as they've graduated high school, they're usually okay to go. And then there are select volunteer programs that also allow 17-year-olds with parental permission to go and travel. But it will be a little bit more limited until he turns 18. But then there are things that you as a family might say are okay. There's no reason that he can't go and travel abroad, or backpack through Europe for part of his year or something like that. So programmatically, there are some limitations, but there's plenty of opportunities for 17-year-old gappers for sure.
Great. Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. I had to take a moment to quickly turn on the lights so I don't look like a serial killer here in all this darkness. Okay, so we have a number of different answers to the question that you put forth. I'm going to let you take your pick, Julia. I don't want to lead the way on this one. So
okay, all right. So Sue said Spanish medical field low cost. Let me tackle that one.
Perfect.
That reminds me of a student of mine named Michelle from a couple of years ago. She really wanted to focus on her Spanish language skills, and she was self-funding her gap year. So this is what she did. She first started saving for her gap year very early on. So that's number one. If you want an affordable gap year, the earlier you can start squirreling away your money, the better. She also applied for grants, and she did get a grant. So she had $3,000 in the bank from that grant. And then the most important thing she did, though, was she chose really well with her affordable gap year opportunity. So she spent 3 months in the fall in Guatemala at a locally run language school. So low cost country, local experience. Spent 3 months there, came home for the holidays to rest and recharge, and then left and went down to southern Mexico, to Oaxaca City, Mexico, and did a volunteer program there for about 5.5 months. So longer amount of time. The fewer places you go, the more affordable it will be. The more you move around, it can get expensive. So she really planted herself in the city, worked at a low cost opportunity, and had an amazing experience. This was not medical related. It was a microfinance, like a women's empowerment project that she was working on. And she was doing more data collection and calculation and evaluation for this nonprofit, but amazing experience. For someone who's interested in the medical field, I would say that there's plenty of opportunities in public health. So there are opportunities for gap year students to go into schools and talk about nutrition and hand washing and dental hygiene and things like that. that might sound basic to us, but not every school in every country has a public health curriculum. And so that kind of stuff can be really important. For like other types of medical work, I would say the other thing that you could do is actually get your EMT certification on your gap year. So maybe you spend 3 months abroad in a Spanish speaking country, you learn the Spanish, that's part of the year. Second half of the year, you get your EMT certification and volunteer on an ambulance in your own community. So again, when you're thinking about a gap year, most people do multiple things. So you can take goals and kind of place them in different areas of the year to kind of create a really more full experience. So, all right, that's that one. Do you want me to take another one, Claire, or do we want to move
I
on?
want you, yes, if you could take Meg and or Shishir's, because they're the ones who posed that question originally, I would love to know also. This is still a little general, but something creative with the arts.
Okay.
And I believe they might have mentioned Southern California as well, so maybe domestic.
Okay, so Southern California would be a more local experience. So let's pretend for a moment that half the year is local to save money and then half the year is abroad. So for the local experience, I'll say entirely US. Okay, so for US based opportunities in the arts. So there are some, like I have a student right now who's in Philadelphia, and they are an artist. They're into puppetry, actually, is their main art form. And they actually decided in the fall that they wanted to volunteer at a local arts school for like an after school program for kids. And so they originally started off as a volunteer and they were just kind of a teaching assistant. And then they got a promotion halfway around the holidays. And now they still are in Philly. They had planned to maybe go abroad or do something else, but they love this work so much that they decided to just double down. And now they're like a paid teaching assistant. So seeking out local opportunities in your community that are arts related can be amazing, whether it's teaching, working at a museum, shadowing an artist, working on your own art. So I would say that that's a really great way to spend a more localized gap year, is really saying like, what's my art form? How can I gain how can I stretch my own creative expression and artistic wings, while also figuring out how my interest in the arts practically applies in a career setting. And then there are programs as well that can really give you training and help you expand the skill set. So there's some art specific schools in places like Colorado and Massachusetts. There's a couple gap year programs that aren't necessarily art focused, but have like an arts, I don't know, like sub curriculum or something like that. So there's many ways to plug into the arts as well in the States. And then I just have to say, if you can go abroad and enjoy the arts on your gap year, like it's amazing. I was just in Italy in the fall on an arts-based gap year program for a few days. And then I was also visiting art schools, and I went to Florence and went to like a place where you can just go and learn art in Florence, Italy. And I mean, it's just a dream. So yeah, there's many, many ways to spend time with the arts on your gap year, whether in your own community or across the world.
Wow, that is amazing. Yes, Meg, definitely. I love your comment. I think you will have to take her to Italy. That is a dream.
Right before this call, I had a pre-departure conversation with one of my families, and the mom is taking the daughter to France to kind of drop her off. So maybe you need to do a drop off, Meg, and extend for a little bit.
I think most definitely, yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't see any new questions coming in, so I'm going to ask you my question that I had before, Julia.
Okay, cool.
Unless one pops in which case I won't. But I am curious to know, so as a gap year counselor, as a consultant, what are kind of those overlooked hurdles that you see a lot of families struggle with when planning their gap year, and how to kind of counteract those? So maybe like unforeseen gap year costs or flight logistics or, things like that, just that these families can keep in mind while they're beginning their gap year journey.
All right, so I feel like there's different sets of concerns, whether you're a parent or a student. Should I focus on the parent concerns more? Because that's probably who our audience is tonight. So I think that one thing that has already come up in the chat and in the questions is kind of observing like your kid needing to do something and you wanting to do it for them, or like the kind of urge to kind of activate them. And so I think that that is a real barrier for parents, because we all have more developed organizational skills, and I don't know, there's just, you can kind of imagine what a gap year could be for your own kid, and it can be really frustrating if you see them not acting on those recommendations or just not doing enough. And so there's a point at which you have to intercede and encourage them to make a decision or to do something. But then there's also times where you really need to back off and let them sometimes fail upward on their gap time. And so really where there's that distinction in letting it be or act or making them do something is in that planning phase, because they really do need to have a plan in order to make their gap year meaningful. You really don't want a situation where a student is hesitant about a gap year, doesn't actively make any decisions, and then they wind up on your couch for a year. Like that's the worst case scenario for a gap year, in my opinion. It's even worse, in my opinion, than them saying, well, what I really want to do is go rent an Airbnb in upstate New York and record a album with my band. And you might be like, oh, that is not how I want my kid using their gap time. But guess what? Like then they get it out of their system, or they discover all these other skills by living alone or living with their friends that are going to prepare them for the next step. And there's all these side benefits of adulting that happen when a student kind of takes control over their own year. So as long as you think they will be safe, as long as it's happening within like the budget that's agreed on, you know, let them have this year. And it may not be the year that you want for them, but it will be the year that they're meant to have, if that makes sense. So again, that's a little bit, I don't know if that wound its way into like making sense, Claire, but that's kind of my philosophy on it.
That's excellent. That so makes sense. And I think those are amazing points. So thank you so much, Julia. We are nearing 5:45 Central Time or 6:45 for you all Eastern. So I'm going to do a last final call for questions. So if you have that, raise your hand, throw it in really quick. Otherwise,
this went by so fast. I can't believe how fast this went.
It flew. It's always so fun with our gap year community and with you. So thank you again, Julia. I'm going to drop Julia's website in here just in case anybody is eager to connect right away. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time for one final announcement. And actually before that, Julia, I believe we have your contact information here again too. I'm not sure if you want to add anything here.
Yeah, I guess what I would also say that for any of our people who are on social media, I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram. I'm even on TikTok, believe it or not. So find me there. It's all at, my handle is always en route gap year. So you can find me on any, your preferred social media handle or social media platform there. And yeah. And oh, the other thing I would say is that I would love to hear from any and all of you. But I will be out of communication for about a week next week, just while I'm in Colombia with my family. We're going to be like literally in the jungle. So from February 21st to 28th, I will be kind of off the map. So if you email me, I will get back to you. It'll just take a little longer than usual. So that's just disclaimer.
Great information to know and so cool about your trip. I hope that you will be active on social media afterwards so we can all see the highlights. And so thank you again, Julia, and thank you everybody for tuning in here. I see something just popped up. Okay, unfortunately, we're at the end of our hour unless you're able to take this question really quick, Julia, in the last 2 minutes.
This is a big one.
Yes.
We kind of did cover this a little bit, but I would say that the trick to getting someone who's undermotivated engaged with their gap time, and by the way, if they're undermotivated about life in general, there could be some mental health stuff at play too. So I'm not sure if that's the situation, but so number one, wellness, good mental health. And if the second thing is that they just don't know what to do, everybody is curious about something. So figuring out what the spark is with your kid and then figuring out how to light it on their gap year is going to help make it fun for them, meaningful for them, relieving for you. So that sounds like it might be a longer conversation, but happy to extend that, offline.
Definitely. And as a reminder, in case this participant came in late too, Julia did mention that most gap year consultants, herself included, you guys offer a free 1-hour consultation. So that could be a really great bridge into that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, one final reminder, Good Lord. One final reminder to join us for Gap Year Fair if you haven't done so already. They are incredible events. You'll start off the night with a Gap Year 101 webinar. Julia's spoken at them. I believe you have some more maybe coming up, Julia.
Yeah, I'll be in one of the rooms on Thursday.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten enough tonight, you can come find me on Thursday.
Yes, absolutely. So please do register. I dropped a link to that. Also, in exciting news, we finalized our plans for some in-person fairs as well. So if you're in the area, check out those links, and hopefully you can be able to connect with some of these amazing Gap Year consultants and providers in person. We would love to see you there. So that's all we have for you tonight. Don't forget to tune into more crash courses to come. You're registered for all of them. So we are looking forward to connecting more in the near future. All right.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Hope it was helpful.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Julia. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.